History's first simp, everyone. Our penultimate episode of the series opened with the profs ordering the girls to actually get out of the giant robot because, as it turned out, unlike their original OG counterpart, the Dynamo Z wasn't designed for combat. Then again, even with the original, that attribute was debatable. But yeah, while it couldn't absorb the power of the Getter Rays, it did have arguably an even stronger power, time travel.
でロボットの形してんだよ。
この姿がいいんだよ。
そうよ、最高。
The way I see it, if you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
Yeah, can't argue with that. With the time machine, they of course could have prevented him from ever being released by traveling back in time to before his black light was frozen in that glacier from the first episode and move it to another hiding spot. Thus, when Ken would destroy the glacier, he would also release the black light. However, that event also released the white light that originally gave the girls their powers. I'd also argue that they would end up creating a massive time paradox, as the only reason the Dynamo Z was created was to counter him. Thus, wisely, they decided to just travel back to the Edo period to ask Kenai for some of his Kenium that he originally used to seal the Crab Devil away with, and thereby not significantly change the timelines. Again, I gotta point out how designing the Gear Robo toys is a very difficult task, as you can end up with stuff like this. This resulted in an awesome sequence where the Dynamo Z took a page out of the Richard Donner Superman movie and circled around the Earth a few times to time warp. Of course, they didn't spin the planet in the opposite direction, as that would just be silly, and instead, I'm guessing they went like 88 miles per hour or something like that. Granted, I don't know why that resulted in them briefly turning into their toddler forms from episode 47, other than to use as a part of a really well animated music video sequence. Seriously, if you couldn't tell by now, this is easily the best animated episode of the whole series, with Yoshikazu Tomita putting in some overtime with his key animations. Legit amazing stuff. Anyway, thanks to Mojo, he managed to attach some of his particles onto the mech to keep track of them. Regardless though, the girls soon arrived in the Edo period. Just have some god baby fox erase everyone's memories and you'll be a-okay. And it didn't take long before the girls of two different eras met. However, while they managed to avoid that one overused toy cliche and just got straight to the point, Kenai wasn't able to give them any of his Kenium as it had already been all used on him and he didn't know how to make more. However, he was able to confirm that the white lights were essentially the same thing, so they just need to recollect the lights that hadn't given the girls and Peach their powers. And of course, because Toy always has to work in sets of 7, that meant that there were 3 unaccounted lights. Fortunately, they did see one of the lights while traveling through the time warp, which of course meant that they had somehow traveled throughout time. Well, okay, this should lead to a fun little final story arc for this series, as the girls travel through time and get into shenanigans and... Wait, what did I say at the beginning of this video? Our penultimate episode of the series... Oh yeah... Yeah, we'll talk more about that later, but for now, the girls managed to get a tracking device and bag to contain the white lights with from Kenai. With that, their first stop ended up being the Stone Age, where the light attached itself to a random cave woman who... Toy animation, giving kids degenerate fetishes since 1948. But yeah, Miss Bellum's ancestor quickly became the alpha female, being the first one to discover fire, which also caught the attention of the mayor's ancestor, who appropriately looked more like his OG counterpart than the present-day version. And kind of wisely, the girls were hesitant of taking back the light, as the discovery of fire was kind of an important part of human evolution, and maybe the light was always meant to travel back in time to jumpstart it. Fortunately, the ancient mare managed to imitate her, and thus there was no longer any issue of taking it. It is a brief scene, but as someone who really likes time travel stories, I do appreciate when characters actually discuss stuff like how what they might be doing might affect the timelines.
Don't do anything that affects anything, unless it turns out you were supposed to do it.
However, an even bigger and pinker time anomaly had arrived to stop them. Fuzzy Lumpkins had originally volunteered to stop the girls from sealing him, but things kind of changed when... Have I pointed out yet how this version of Fuzzy isn't that much different than his OG counterpart? Maybe a little bit more of a creeper. He tried to destroy Kenai's tracker, but Kaoru stopped him, and then... I love it when they make my job easy. With that, they took the white light from the ancient vellum and moved on to what the subtitles say was 31 AD. I wonder if anything significant happened around that time. Oh. Well, actually, this is another translation error, and they were going to 31 BC. More on that in just a bit. But first, the next villains who were going to intercept them were... Anyway, they then just kind of blazed through, revealing to the boys that they were originally created from the DNA of the girls and Mosho's hair, which understandably depressed the little brats. But they were just as quickly cheered up when him offered to turn them into true monsters if they dealt with the girls. So, okay, on the one hand, this might be a fun little reference to the OG, where the boys were brought back thanks to him recreating them into new life forms. However, yeah, this whole scene does feel a little rushed, and hell, they might have been able to even use this as a basis for a whole episode of itself. Yeah, get the conspiracy wall out. I do believe that this one episode was originally going to be a whole time travel story arc that was going to close out the series, all crammed into one, but for likely a plethora of reasons, they never got full episodes to themselves. I'll say it likely wasn't due to a lack of episode count, as the show was going to end with 52, covering an entire year, and that also is very seldom a number that is exceeded even for established franchises, much less a spin-off like this. More likely, I would hypothesize it was due to a lack of money. Just from what we've seen in this very episode, on top of having some new set pieces outside of Tokyo City, these episodes would have likely been far better animated than the average episode in this show. However, likely due to both this show and Precure Splash Star underperforming in their numbers, cuts and changes had to be made, hence why we got a few redundant filler episodes like the many failures of Mojo. With that in mind though, do I think it's a huge loss that we might have missed out on a whole story arc? Not exactly. I mean, the more fillery episodes we did get certainly weren't bad, and this show wasn't hard locked into any sort of serialized storytelling, so I don't think it was totally necessary. That said, I would have loved to see some of this get full-on episodes, such as this bit where the Z team were diverted to a certain other dimension.
一体どうなっちまったんだ? ここどこですの?
Yep, they were sent to the OG dimension just as their counterparts were fighting the giant balloon fish that would force them to use their own version of the dynamo. We could have gotten two giant robots piloted by magical girls while they played some Godzilla-esque BGM. What more could you ask for? Though to be fair, an episode like this would have likely required all sorts of behind-the-scenes deals with licensing and all that, which might explain why the fish was sporting a different color than either of his OG versions. Another thing that might have been featured more were the Dynamo Z's two other forms based off of Kaoru and Miyako. Yet, ironically, like the real Gerobo, the first one always gets the lion's share of screen time. By the way, nice touch having the Dynamo Buttercup go from her straight-haired OG version to the more shonen anime haircut. Anyway, after just skimming through a fantastic crossover possibility, the girls arrived in 31 BC during the Battle of Actium, which was a real-life naval battle with control of all of Rome and Egypt on the line. Cleopatra fought for the latter and would inevitably lose, but the White Light was taking things in slightly different directions. Though before the girls could get to her, they had to deal with the rowdy rough boys who had used him's powers to play a game of ancient Yu-Gi-Oh with them. Okay, now this is something I wish they had made a full episode out of. Instead though, they just quickly defeated them, this time with Miyako using a powered-up attack, which I'm guessing also would have been a once-an-episode thing with the actual story arc we could have gotten, and repelled the boys with the same weakness as their OG counterparts. And from there, they took the white light from Cleopatra. because she lost this battle, and in the process Egypt, Cleopatra would end up committing Sudoku in order to just be spared the indignity of being taken as Rome's prize. Go girls. Last up, they went to 1506, which is one of the debated dates of when Da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa. They found the white light in said painting's mouth, and thankfully took it away, leaving behind the famous awkward smile. And then someday, you'll even turn into this lady, and then a lollified version of her. And yes, writer Da Vinci is one of my favorite servants. However, just as they were about to leave, Mosho intercepted them out of vengeance for what they did to his sons. And to his credit, he managed to get the girls on the ropes, but they were saved by the Dynamo Z and the white lights they had retrieved. Man, this is the main reason I don't really mind possibly missing out on a whole arc of these kinds of episodes. Yes, this and the team attacks might have been short bursts of Sakuga, but they're still really fun moments that, had they been spread out into a full-on arc, with likely a limited animation budget, might not have looked as good as this. Anyway, they defeated Mosho at the cost of him disabling the Dynamo, which just makes me wonder how they got back to the present. But yeah, in the present, him finally managed to convince the defeated monsters to give him their black lights, of course without the intention of ever giving it back. And the episode ended on a cliffhanger as he began his final attack. This episode was a good example of quality over quantity. In exchange for likely a scrap time travel story arc, we just got an episode full of good Sakuga with the girls as they travel through some pretty fun and different locations in time. Again, don't get me wrong, I would have loved to have seen some of these stories play out more, but if there were some understandable reasons behind the scenes why they couldn't do it, and not just because the creators didn't put their best foot forward, then I can excuse it. First of all, of the potential episodes we could have gotten in this show, I obviously would have loved to have seen a crossover with the OG, though I do understand some of the legal hangups that would have come with. Thus, the next episode I would have loved to have seen would have been the Egypt episode, where the girls would have to deal with both an actually threatening version of the boys and a superpowered Cleopatra. Alas, we only got small snippets of those possible tales, and yet I'm left mostly satisfied, as what we did get was still very well animated and pretty fun when you disregard the ultimate fate of a certain character. I think it helps that I do still get the sense that the creators were trying their best, and if this had been the best compromise they could come to due to budget constraints, then I can accept it. And while I objectively can't call this great storytelling, as there are parts that are rushed through and even feel incomplete, like him shutting down the Dynamo near the end, with no big fanfare or explanation of how the girls got back to the present, it was still a very fun story thanks to some amazing animation and just the epic scale of some of these set pieces in spite of them not being fully explored. And overall, while this might not have been the most ideal way of closing out the series, considering what it's based on, maybe just having fun with the ridiculousness of it all is all that really matters. Currently, we're working on the next part of the review for the OG series of Precure, appropriately enough, considering that the new series is just a week away. Obviously, we're still looking forward to Hirogaru Sky, but just like this very review, sometimes it's just fun to look back at your beginnings just to have a point of reference. But yeah, do look forward to it. Until then, though, farewell for now, my friends, and great, another singularity is formed.